The magnificent red deer is Britain's largest wild mammal, and the uplands of Exmoor and the Quantock Hills are home to over 3,000, the greatest concentration of this majestic creature in all England. Come the spring, comes the cull of young stags. Some are taken by the hunts, most are taken by the rifle.
The numbers on Exmoor seem to be a minimum of about 2,500 on Exmoor, another minimum of 500 to 600 on the Quantocks. There are other deer populations we didn't really consider fully, stretching right down to the Devon-Cornwall border. So in the whole of the Westcountry, almost certainly there must have been well over 5,000 red deer. In most wild populations, you find the females become more predominant, mainly because those who stalk the deer tend to not only prefer to stalk males, but also the shooting season is much longer. It's about 9 months as opposed to 4 or 5 months. So there's always a slight imbalance. There's not a overall threat that we've got far too many deer. It's just that in certain areas, deer numbers are very high and there may be a problem.
The way the deer are culled, by the hunt or with a rifle, is immensely controversial.
I stalk red deer on Exmoor, I've done for the last 11 years, but also I've hunted red deer throughout, well, since I was knee-high to a grasshopper really. And so I've seen both sides of the argument or story. Yes, this deer here, as you can see there, has actually been shot through the back leg. This deer was seen a couple of times through the winter months, but unfortunately we never actually came to dealing with it. It couldn't jump any fences. It had got stuck in a small area and slowly gone back to nothing. But the actual bullet had gone in and smashed the leg bone, as you can see that bullet hole there. So its leg was actually running, stuck out at 90 degrees as it was running around. And then lastly, we come to this lovely stag. Again, unknown whether it was a poached deer or whether somebody legitimately took a pop at it, but probably somebody got up behind it and tried to shoot it in the back of the neck, again causing a superficial wound which actually ran down and hit the skull but slid down on the outside of the skull and then hitting the jaw, would have resulted in this stag starving to death.
This was the head of the stag caught yesterday by the hunt. They were on another deer and someone seen that this one was injured and told the hunt about it, and they stopped off the deer that they were originally on and went after this one. It's more than likely been shot by poachers. It wouldn't have been able to eat or probably wouldn't have been able to drink, and it would have just gradually wasted away. So the hunt put it out of a lot of misery.
But the opponents of hunting believe that pursuing deer with packs of hounds and killing with a shotgun is not only inefficient, but intensely cruel.
When I started, there was maybe 4 or 5 rifles in the whole area. Now, I would hate to hazard a guess how many's in here. I'm talking about hundreds of rifles. So we've got to get control on the rifle. My mind goes to either the neck or behind the shoulder or my eyes, and I'm concentrating on that part of the deer. And I just drop the gun straight on that part and pull the trigger. You mustn't hesitate, because if you start hesitating, you'll start doing this. It's like having a camera without a tripod. I shoot freehand, and I mustn't start aiming like this at the deer, because I'll start doing this with the gun. I've got to see the deer, concentrate on the part that I'm looking at, and as soon as that crosses on it, bang, it's got to go straight in there. Oh, so I'll miss it. The most efficient way to cull deer is with a high-powered rifle. There's no doubt about that, no argument about that. From the point of view of the deer, it is far quicker, and there's not the disturbance amongst the rest of the deer as there is with a pack of hounds and 300 or 400 followers. But I mean, whereby a pack of hounds will go out and cull one deer in a day, the efficiency of the rifle is that if you could get in the right place, you can cull 3, 4, maybe 5. Well, this is a 270 Steyr rifle, and it's loaded with a 150 grain bullet. And I can kill deer anything from nothing up to 150 yards. Now this is a 12-bore double-barrel shotgun, which is not used by the hunt, but a similar weapon to this is used by the hunt, only it will be single barrel. It won't be a double-barreled shotgun. And they will use either a buckshot or a SSS or SBSG cartridge to shoot it. Now the range between and the effectiveness between this one and the rifle is far less with the shotgun. This cartridge is loaded with 9 ball shot or 11 ball shot, and when you fire, as it exits the barrel, your shot begins to start to spread. So the further that the target is away, the more your spread's going to be, and the less number of pellets or ball is going to hit an effective part of the deer or whatever you're shooting at. So you must shoot at extremely close range with it.
Summer is a wonderful time on the moors and a busy time for the red deer. Hunting stops at the end of April, and in late May and June the hinds calve. The mothers will leave the herds and retreat to a place where they can give birth undisturbed. The calves are born with freckle coats, which give way to the distinctive red only towards the autumn. There's food aplenty, and the deer use the woodland and gorse as cover while they browse the whortleberry, heather and farmers' grassland. And it's the damage they cause which creates the need to cull the numbers. There's no doubt that Exmoor is overgrazed, but there are over 500,000 sheep in the national park and only about 3,000 deer. So, how much of the damage to the heather and woodland is caused by deer alone? This is one of the things Langbein is attempting to quantify.
I've been to some extent surprised how much time they're spending feeding in the woodlands during the summer months, whereas I expected most of their impact on the woodland regeneration would have been in the winter. And in fact in the winter they're actually much more out in the open moorland, and in the summer months they're spending a lot of time in the woods, possibly because they want to get away from mainly flies and also public disturbance. They try to get in the shaded areas. And also they're using the gorse, which you see around the moorland quite a lot here. That's actually one of the main areas they seem to be using for cover. One of the main issues that this research wanted to address was the impact deer are actually having on the ancient woodlands and heather moorland. And the ancient woodlands, such as sessile oak woodlands, as we have here in Hawcombe and other parts of Exmoor, they're very characteristic of Exmoor. But they do lack a lot of regeneration because they were very heavily coppiced until 100 years ago, leaving now very even-aged woodlands with nearly all the trees about 100 years old, but very little young growth underneath. And one issue with that is the overgrazing. And really we were trying to find out to what extent deer are responsible for the lack of regeneration and what sort of numbers of deer and sheep grazing you can tolerate and still
have a good level of regeneration. Now, grazing is actually a quite useful thing in the woodland because it creates places within the ground flora for actually seedlings to take, but at the same time too much grazing will of course eat away all the seedlings. So what we've actually done is to erect a number of exclosures in different parts of Exmoor, some such as here in an open area where we've cleared everything down to ground level, cutting all the trees down to about 20 centimetres high, clearing all the scrub. And then we erected this enclosure and to keep out all the deer grazing as well as the sheep grazing. And this is what we now have. You know, bramble regrowing inside to about 6 foot, as well as trees of birch and hazel reaching up to about 10 foot. Whereas outside you can see very little regeneration. Virtually every bramble shoot you can see has got a bite mark, and taking the tip of the shoot off, you can see some young regrowth coming from this year's growth, but by the end of the year most of that's likely to be grazed off. Yes, here we've got actually one of the coppice stools that we didn't cut. It actually was cut about 10 or 20 years ago, and it's regrown very slowly. But you can see that everything up to about 5 foot high has been bitten off. Every single shoot is bitten off. Whereas occasionally a shoot has got higher, and once it's out of height of deer grazing at about 6 foot, they stop being browsed. And once they've reached that height, they've got a good chance of making it into a mature tree.
The condition of the deer is extremely important to actually estimate how many deer actually born every year, and therefore how many can be culled or need to be culled if you don't want the population to increase. And really, again, most of what we know on the population dynamics of red deer is based on the Scottish deer, which live in much more severe climates, and the deer down here in so much better condition that they tend to conceive regularly at just 18 months old. So we actually, over the last 3 years, actually collected information on body weights, reproductive rates, on close to 1,000 red deer culled in different areas of the Westcountry, going right down to the Devon-Cornwall border, as well as Quantocks and Exmoor. And really throughout the whole area of the Westcountry, we do find they are in very good condition.
All my work, barring rough sketches, which I do just for fun, all finished work is done with book illustrations in mind. I'm a writer, not an artist, but I am able to draw well enough anyway to produce my own illustrations. The day I saw the great herd of deer, well, I shall always remember the date, it was St. Valentine's Day. And I was just about here, and a huge herd of deer came up out of the valley there. It was a most wonderful sight. When I got home, I made a sketch of what I had seen while it was still fresh in my memory. This was redwood bottom down here, and the deer began to come up, and they coalesced into a great herd, and then they began to move on again, moving away left-handed. And by that time we had counted over 100. But herds of that size do tremendous damage to farmland and crops. But because hunting is the sport of this country, and especially of the farmers tolerate the damage.
While the hinds are busy with calves, the stags are busy with their antlers. Antlers are shed each year and grow again over the summer months. Growth is rapid, a wonder of the natural world. A stag with growing antlers is said to be in velvet. The soft membrane of blood vessels and tissue is a distinctive sight. Exmoor custom has it that the antlers grow with the bracken, and by August the bracken is fully grown. In late summer the stags can be seen rubbing the tissue on old tree stumps to get rid of the velvet. They then make the move from their home territory to their rutting grounds ready for the autumn mating season. The year comes full circle. Using the radio collars and the tracking devices, Jochen Langbein was able to plot the movement of the hind and stag herds and found fascinating differences in their behaviour.
Part of the radio tracking, of course, also allows us to see the ranging behaviour of the deer. We can find out where they're moving to in different seasons, how they actually shift their range between the seasons. And certainly the stags, we did find, did shift their range quite significantly, with one area being used mainly during the mating season and possibly staying there for a month or two afterwards. Others stayed until spring. But from early spring until the summer, the stags moved out of the hind areas into quite different areas. The furthest movement we observed was for one big stag, which I've called Leo, and he, during this rutting season, spent most of his time in the Horner Wood National Nature Reserve, where we had actually collared him the year before. And he mated there in 1995, but then on the 1st of November, he moved straight away right to a completely different area, which is North Hill near Minehead, and spent all of the next 7 months in the Minehead and North Hill area. And then one morning in September, I believe, the 1996, in the morning I recorded him just outside Minehead town centre, but the afternoon he was back in exactly the location where we darted him the year before and was back in his rutting area.
Here is a magnificent Exmoor stag. Dark antlers and white tips. I would say he must be 11 or 12 years old. He's been coming here for 2 or 3 years. He's keeping the other males away from his harem of hinds. All my life I've watched deer through the seasons over many years now, and get a great deal of pleasure from what one sees. They're the most noble of beasts. The land belongs to them. They were here long before we were. They are adapted to their habitat. They change their coat colouring through the seasons. Their antlers cycle and rutting and mating all fits in so beautifully with the changing Exmoor year. Every year the antlers are shed. So every year of the stag's life, whatever antlers he's carrying are shed. And they fall quite cleanly. There's a layer which breaks down, it's held on by a last tiny bit of bone, and in the spring of the year and summer they fall to the ground. Every year of the stag's life he increases in length and points. So this specimen here, with Exmoor condition, he's about 7 years old, and he's carrying 3 points up the antler and has 2 prongs on the top. We would call that one the brow, that one the bay, and that one the tray. Those 3 are the rights. So he has all his rights and 2 atop. There has been emphasis on culling stags, not only with the gun but also through the hunting, and the hind cull is not done as it used to be. Not so many are being taken out. So yes, I would say there is quite an imbalance of the sexes, and most especially a shortage of mature quality stags. That is those with 12-pointer heads and more. They're quite a rare animal now.
there are two very large deer management groups or deer management societies. There's the Exmoor and District Deer Management Society. Really, I'm suggesting smaller deer management groups, not because the large deer management groups aren't useful. I think they're very useful and will continue to be useful as an umbrella organisation, but really to make them work better, I think really we need local building blocks. I mean, this here is an example of one area which I think would be very suitable for a small deer management group. It shows here Grabbist Hill, which is lies just above Minehead. But you can see quite distinct, it's a hill area which is quite well separated by roads and from the other hills nearby. But essentially it holds in the region of about 100 deer. And really it's owned by perhaps 10 major landowners who at present, most of them do their culling of deer totally independently, each taking a few deer, but not in the knowledge of each other. And where you've got such a geographically distinct area and a reasonably small number of deer managers, it should be possible, as well as very desirable, to bring those people together and for them to decide together roughly how many they intend to cull the following year. The general public often doesn't realise that deer do need to be managed. They feel that they're wild animals, they don't need to be shot, but obviously they would increase dramatically without any culling.
There is plenty of habitat for deer. The main problem is not that the habitat may be there, but whether man allows them to live there. They're the jewel in the crown of Exmoor, the deer, and we must preserve them no matter what.